Ho, 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 and welcome to the Christmas list. My name is the jolly old Saint Jackalus, and with me is my number one most special little gnome, Forrest. Say hello to the children, Forrest.
Hello.
And today we will be discussing a little piece of media that we think you might want to watch when you're with your loved ones this holiday season. Tokyo Godfathers is a very charming little film. However, activation warnings for a fair bit of homophobia, transphobia, and violence against the unhoused. Oh, also, activation warning for suicidal ideation and attempts. I'm not going to keep that up.
Okay, children. Santa Claus doesn't exist. He's gone now.
Yeah, no, Tokyo Godfathers. Forrest, what was your exposure to this before we watched it?
Well, my partner Amy had just suggested it multiple occasions. She was like, "Yeah, we need to watch this. It's a great film." And then I didn't get around to actually watching it until we watched it last Christmas.
Yeah, this time last year.
Was it last Thanksgiving, or was it right before Christmas? I don't know. Yeah, that was the last time I had seen it, and I definitely going into it this time, there was a lot more that I forgot than I was expecting. But I guess it is kind of a rewatch. But what did you know about this movie?
Yeah, so I had stumbled across it a couple of years before we watched it, and I thought I'd watched all of it, but turns out I just watched the first 2/3 of it. So I watched everything up until the point where things start going wild. Because make no mistake, things get wild. So we actually watched it in theaters the Monday before recording this as part of the 20th anniversary, right?
That's what I was just trying to figure out. I probably should have figured this out before we started talking.
We watched it in theaters as sort of a digital remaster re-release for the 20th anniversary and a celebration of the author's work. It looks like it was sort of part of a series of their other work as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this was a big deal too because it was upscaled to 4K. And I think this is the first time this film has ever been in this high quality.
What's the name of the author again?
Satoshi Kon. He also directed the films A Perfect Blue and Paprika. There's another film that he directed that is also pretty popular.
Yeah, Perfect Blue and Paprika are films that I'd seen before, and they are wild. If you think that this will be a Perfect Blue or a Paprika, it's not, thankfully. This is a lot less psychological. This is a lot less horrifying. This is something that you can legitimately watch, enjoy, and feel good about. So it is, in essence, the story of 3 unhoused people in sort of the found family that they've created for themselves, finding a baby on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve and figuring out what to do with it. Along the way, they find out a lot about themselves and about each other, and they all have various opportunities to sort of address and rethink about how they're living. And well, that's not true, not how they're living, but it gives them a chance to sort of look inward and work through things that they've had, certain problems that they've made for themselves maybe. It's a lovely little film. It's very charming. I said it and I meant it when I said, activation warnings for homophobia and transphobia. I don't know if it was the translation for the re-release or the translation that I watched last, but I definitely remembered it being more homophobic than it is, which is a good thing. And as it stands, it isn't even particularly outright in a lot of it. It occurs less than a handful of times. The core cast are Jin, who is sort of this middle-aged fella, has been living this way for a while. We established pretty early that he's a mean drunk. But we also established pretty early that he can be very caring for the folks that he cares about. And so when he's sober, he's, a little grouchy, a little stick in the mud, but, he's generally good about things. One of the other core members is Hana, and Hana is a trans woman, middle-aged as well. We don't hard confirm her age. I will say, I guess I don't know if canonically she's trans or if she's a crossdresser, but she does very heavily imply that she uses she, her pronouns. There are some very good comedy bits where people call her an old geezer or like a stupid grandpa, and she'll go, "Old I'll take, grandpa I won't," and like start freaking out on them. So it does seem like it is a gender identity matter. She's a very delightful character, and she's done very well, I think. But when Jin is drinking, he does purposefully misgender her, and he does, use homophobic terms. Happens maybe 3 times, but if that is something that you are sensitive to, that's something that's worth bearing in mind.
Yeah, I think it delves into, that aspect of Japanese culture that like is so often overlooked, and does it in a tasteful manner, because it represents this character as just, being a person, and they're allowed to be a character, rather than a representation or, just like a jab at that like aspect of culture and society, which, unfortunately a lot of media tends to. But then like the third character that I don't think you mentioned is Miyuki. She's like is she a teenager? I guess I never really. Yeah, but she like basically ran away from home, and she just kind of like has been living with them for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And I mean it's like such a fascinating film, because I just don't remember it from the last time we watched it. Like I feel like I just like did not pay attention, but I also think that's part of why seeing it in theaters was so like beneficial, because when you're in a theater, it is much easier to like focus on the film and like really absorb every aspect of it. And I mean, even since then, since like a year ago, I feel like the way I consume media has changed pretty drastically, just with, my understanding of writing and characters, and just like, what makes good characters. And all the characters in this are just so fascinating. They all have like fantastic motivations. Their arcs throughout the movie are very well written and concise, in my opinion. Just overall, I was like, damn, I don't remember it being this good.
And I think even if you are paying attention to it, it's easy to forget certain things about the movie because of how it's structured. It is a linear story told consecutively, right? Like there's no trickery, there's no nonsense that way, but each scene is sort of self-contained, right? Because the events happen in like the week of Christmas to New Year's, which is, snow on the ground, people are inside. So a lot of the scenes are outdoor in a snowy cityscape, and there's not a lot of other characters. And so each scene kind of feels like they could be done anywhere, and some of them could be like, you could swap them around a bit, but it's because there's not sort of that grounding force, because the driving plot line is, there's this baby, what are we going to do with this baby? There's no like, impending doom or powering up, or like, it's not like the moon is slowly getting closer like in Majora's Mask, right? Like you're just going through the city trying to figure things out. And some of the scenes are just wild. And so, yeah, I think it's fair to just sort of forget some of the aspects of this film.
Well, this is kind of an interesting and important piece of information. I did not know that this is co-written by Keiko Nobumoto, who wrote the screenplay for Cowboy Bebop. She also wrote like Samurai Champloo. I'm sure a lot of you out there know those shows because, I mean, sometimes it's crazy to think about how much of a staple Cowboy Bebop is.
But yeah, Tokyo Godfathers is very touching. It's very fun, and there's never really a point where it feels like it's dragging on, because we're essentially solving a mystery until we've solved it. And then we get thrown an incredible curveball. And by incredible, I don't mean that it's well done. I mean that it's one heck of a curveball. That is something that I should have said up front. It's not necessarily an activation warning, but there is a depiction of mental health that's very I don't know enough to know if it is sensationalized, because it's
what are we talking about?
The depiction of postnatal depression. There's, so not to put too fine a point on it, but the curveball at the end involves a woman who had lost her child during childbirth, doing some pretty wild things in a very sensationalized, look at this crazy woman kind of way. And it's not done as like she's this big spectacle, but it's wild and outlandish, and it is what drives like the conflict for the last like 20 minutes of the movie. So there is that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, that is one of those things that's really hard to discuss because, like, obviously we're not women and we've never had children, but you know, it's like just as its representation of Hana, I feel like when you're looking at that character, like, none of it feels in poor taste to me, you know? Like, none of it feels like it's this kind of, like, exaggerated representation of what that's like. I mean, like, I feel like the character, you know, has experienced tragedy, and, like, people do crazy things when they've experienced tragedies, you know?
Obviously, we kind of opened up with this is something worth watching, because it is, right? It's very good character writing. It's very nice dialogue, like very good dialogue. It's a very touching look at just people.
Yeah, so I feel like after this, just be aware of actual spoilers.
Yeah, so we open up on a snowy Tokyo day and a nativity play. The play turns into a Christmas Eve sermon, and we sort of pan across the crowd and we find who will become our two core characters, Hana and Jin. And they are there because supper to follow. So they, you know, they're watching. Hana's into it. Hana does have a spiritual side throughout the film. And again, it's not done in a way that feels trivializing or sensationalizing, just sort of this is a belief that she has that sort of helps her draw strength. Yeah, they're going through, so they then pick up Miyuki.
Yeah, well, because they, like, get food, because...
Yeah, so Miyuki just didn't want to come.
Yeah, I guess. I was unclear, I guess.
I think Miyuki's new enough to the whole lifestyle that she's not, and she's also just, like, being stubborn, and throughout the film she's still a teenager, right? And so she is sort of that, like, aspect to it.
Well, I feel like there's like a whole bit during them, like, getting food that, like, someone is talking about childbirth. I don't remember who brought that up.
So Hana mentions the miracle of Christ's and Mary's virgin conception, while she's next up to get her portioning. And she makes some offhanded comment about, maybe that miracle can happen for me. And then the woman dishing out the food, Hannah looks at her and goes,
Huh?
well, and she goes, give me extra because I'm eating for two.
Yeah.
And then the woman looks confused. But then we cut to Hana giving that extra to Miyuki.
I did find that a lot more funny this time around. Maybe because I just actually like paid attention to it. But yeah. Then they kind of, it's kind of after this point that they're just kind of wandering around, right? Like,
yes and no. Yes, this is where things start happening, which incites them to wander. But this is when we find the baby. They get Miyuki her food, and then they talk a little bit. We establish some of their dynamic. They're hanging out on a rooftop, and then Hana goes to take them to where she had found a set of encyclopedias that she had set aside for Miyuki's Christmas present. And while they're digging around looking for them, turns out somebody grabbed them. But while they're digging around looking for them, they start hearing this baby. And we find the baby.
I think these this whole section I feel like is kind of, it gets you, well, it gives you a sense of what these three characters' dynamic is, because this is kind of when you get introduced to Gin being kind of a hard ass, like him and Miyuki are kind of constantly at each other's throat. They like get into a fight here. Hana is kind of the the arbiter, I guess you could say, like the person who's like trying to keep them from fighting. And that is their dynamic going forward, like that's kind of the whole point of this sequence, I feel like. And then, as Miyuki and Jin are fighting, or Gin, then they just hear this baby cry. And then that kind of like kickstarts the plot, because then, it's interesting setup, because even like, right before this, Hana was literally like, oh, maybe that could happen to me. Maybe I could have a child, by some miracle.
Yeah, and so there's a miracle baby. And that's sort of like the first conflict between the three of them that we experience is, what do we do with them? And right away, Gin's just, no, take her to the police. We're not doing this. What can we give her even? Like, this isn't the environment to raise a child. And Miyuki's kind of just like, that sounds like a good idea. But like Hana is like living out something for herself and is sort of digging her heels in the idea of, no, this was a gift from God to us. It's our responsibility. And so at the very least, they're holding on to the child for the night.
And this also, sorry. I was just going to say that this also kind of introduces aspects of Gen's character where he, he doesn't want anything to do with this baby, because part of him just doesn't want the trouble, but also, like he even kind of lies in this, not long after this, like this kind of introduces you to this aspect of Gin's character where like he does regret his decisions that he's made, and he kind of lies to cover it up by basically telling Hana that like, oh, he did have a daughter and he did have a wife, but they like both passed away, which just ends up being 100% false.
Yeah. So they send Miyuki out to buy milk. Gin sort of starts getting things going, and Hana mentions that, he's good at this whole baby thing. And yeah, he tells the story of being a bike racer, having racked up some debts, being having a child who took ill, passed away, and having his wife soon follow. And after that, he just didn't care about anything. And so that's like the belief that we have moving forward. Yeah, the morning come. So when it's all said and done at the end of the night, Hana is like, yes, we'll take her to the police in the morning. Well, morning comes. Gin's getting woken up by Miyuki. Hana's disappeared with the child. Um, they go out looking for her. They start asking around. It's actually a very like beautiful little montage where they're sort of following her footsteps in the snow. We're sort of talking to some of the other unhoused community members that they've interacted with. Quick aside, when Hana's getting the milk, or not Hana, when Miyuki's getting the milk, she runs into a couple of other unhoused folks who like start to like not pick a fight, but start yelling at her because they bump into each other. And like as they're like criticizing her for it, they have an aside about how she's the one who hangs around Hana and Gin, and how they're not going to mess with her because everybody knows that she's Gin's spoiled princess. So we like prior to this, we'd only really seen them bickering, but we are introduced pretty early to the scene that like Gin does care about her and cares about protecting her.
Well, and this also kind of introduces like you seeing that Miyuki is also kind of interested in taking care of the child, because like they have a book that's like on parenting, and she's just like, okay, I'll just take this and I'll leave. Which I don't feel like, does that book even really like come back?
No, I mean she's reading it.
Yeah, I mean it was just a little, I feel like a short aside to like be like, oh look, she is kind of interested in helping as well.
So really what we do there is, because up to this point she was sort of presented as this like too cool to care, like detached teenager, and so it is showing that she does care, and it's showing that Gin does care. Anyway, they're looking for Hana. They ask around, they find her. I forget where, but they find her.
It's just kind of like, I thought it was just like the middle of a parking lot.
That's what I thought.
Like it was just, I mean it was snowy, so like it's hard to tell.
They end up finding her again, and she goes, nope, we have to find her parents. And so that's the quest moving forward, is they go to find the parents, much to the chagrin of Gin and Miyuki. A whole lot happens.
Oh, well, they remember, well, like, we didn't even say that when they find the baby, they find, like, a key, like a locker key with the baby, because, like, in Japan, like, I mean, this takes place in the 90s, so, like, at the time, they probably would have been physical keys, but, like, nowadays, they have lockers, like, you can rent in, like, subways and stuff like that, which is basically what this is. It's like basically somewhere you can put luggage if you don't want to carry it around for the day, and then come back and grab it. And I don't even, what was even in that locker?
So. Okay.
What?
There's a reason why I didn't bring up the key, because
I'm sorry.
In the storytelling medium, I was going to do it now. And I'll explain what was in the locker. So they go to where they think the locker is. Along the way, we're introduced to... we're not introduced to, but we see that Hana is avoiding her family. Miyuki is avoiding her family. She'd mentioned offhandedly when she was giving Gin crap for being homeless and, like poking fun at him. She mentions that she could go home at any time. And this is when we find out that she has been there for 6 months, because Gin's like, no, 6 months, you're officially also homeless. Anyway, along the way to trying to get to the station, they're on a track trying to get to a particular station, and they run into her father and like the neighboring train. So they sort of get out and do a bunch of running around. Anyway, in the locker is pictures of, there's some luggage, and there's pictures of the child's mom and dad. And that's pretty much it. But that then means that they're going around. There's something that gives them like a hint to like what neighborhood. I think it might be like a business card. Oh, it is a business card of like where of some club. So they go around and they try to go to the club with the pictures. Along the way, they find a guy who's being smushed by his own car because he's sort of trapped underneath it. And there's a little comedy bit. Turns out he is the guy who owns the club. He is also Yakuza. They end up going to his daughter's wedding to one of his commanders, who ends up being the guy that Gin owes money to. This movie doesn't have anything like magical or spectacular about it, but it is very outlandish. There's a lot of ways that we get from one scene to another, or like we resolve a plot point because of some very wild circumstances.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my god, what are the chances?
You know how Spirited Away didn't have an outline? It had a storyboard before like the plot was made.
Oh yeah, I guess I've never heard that before.
Yeah, well, that may be apocryphal, but that is something that I have read once upon a time. This movie and so like that is why Spirited Away is so like non sequitur, so like dreamy, like dream logic. And this movie has a heaping helping of that as well. Anyway, they go to the wedding. Gin starts getting drunk. And as we've established, he's a mean and destructive drunk. So as he's getting drunk, he's getting more and more angry at seeing the guy who he owes money to.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, no, like every time that like they establish that he's a mean drunk, and every time that he does something disruptive or assholish, it's in a scene where he's been drinking.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very subtle. It's very nice. It's a good show, don't tell moment, or like example. Anyway, he's going to clobber the guy, the bridegroom, because he's the guy to whom they owe money. Or to whom he owes money, and he's just angry at seeing him. But he's also the guy who's making the phone call because he owns the club that the woman in the photo, who is the mother of the child, worked at.
That was a mouthful.
There's a hole in the bottom of the sea. There's a log in the hole on the bottom of the sea. There's a bump on the log. Anyway, before he can do it, one of the waitstaff take out a pistol and try to shoot the Yakuza boss. The bridegroom jumps in the way and takes the bullets. And Miyuki, who at this point had gone off to change the diaper of the baby, ends up getting taken as a hostage. The wait staff person and Miyuki sort of get into a cab, and this waitstaff person turns out, and we figure this out kind of in the background through news reports, is a member of like a Mexican crime syndicate who like has it out for like this mob boss or like this Yakuza boss, and so he was sent there to do a hit.
See, that's also like a fascinating part about this movie is like the way that it actually shows like Hispanic people in Japan, you know? Like I've never seen another piece of Japanese media like do that in any way. I mean, maybe they do, but like, yeah, I mean, like it brings in aspects of the real world without doing it for like weird offensive reasons, you know. It's like this feels like a world where people are living, like the reality that there's actually like other people than just Japanese people living in Japan. You know.
Yeah. The hitman is, you know, in a panic because he's trying to get back into hiding, but he's not a bad guy. He sees this young woman, very obviously homeless, with a child, and he's trying to get her back to his place. She doesn't know what he's saying. He's speaking Spanish. We don't know what he's saying because the Spanish is not subtitled. And I love that for two reasons. One, we are supposed to know what the characters know, and the characters don't know what he's saying. And two, it really reinforces sort of the confusion and the panic because you, unless you are Spanish speaking, you don't know what he's saying either. But by nature of, living in the world, you might have picked up a word or two from context, right? So like we hear him saying leche, pointing towards the baby, right? Like, oh, we know he's, kind of like, if you're paying attention, he might be trying to help her out. She's in a panic because he's got a gun. He just took her hostage. She's not paying enough attention to know what's going on. Long and the short, he gets her back to his, the apartment that he's staying at with his wife. And she is breastfeeding. So, Miyuki and the hitman's wife sort of have this moment where they, again, don't speak the same language, but they're still sort of bonding over just like, pictures of family and conversating as much as they can. And it's a very real depiction of like just talking and spending time with somebody and just like sort of how you communicate with folks that you can't communicate with verbally. And again, we don't have subtitles for what the wife is saying either, but we're picking it up through context. And one of the things that I really like about this is Hana is out trying to find Miyuki and the baby. When Hana ends up finding them, the wife basically asks if Hana is the grandmother, and then asks if Hana's the grandfather, right? Because the wife doesn't know.
Yeah.
But what I like about this is, again, the wife speaking Spanish. So Hana answers, no, I'm just a queen who cares. Which means that either Hana knows a little bit of Spanish and picked up on what she was asking, or just heard the word for grandmother and has experienced enough questions about her identity that she then was able to fill in the rest. Anyway, I like that little bit of just like, oh yeah, no, like Hana's actively listening. Is this where they find? Yeah, okay. So meanwhile, Gin had sort of stomped off.
Well, because was this like right after the scene where Hana and Gin are just kind of walking on the sidewalk and Gin's just like drinking and he's just like, I don't want anything to do with this. And then they get in an argument. Is that?
Yeah, this is where, so Gin had taken some booze from the wedding and was just like, we're in over our heads. We're going to the police and we're calling this done. And Hana's like, nope. You're a bad, angry, evil man. And so Hana runs off trying to find her. And so Gin is alone, and he ends up finding this elderly gentleman he thinks is dead in this back alley. Turns out he's not. He does, however, ask for one last wish, or like one last request, because he is dying of the drink that's in Gin's hand. Gin gets him back to his own shelter. He's also an unhoused individual. And so they're sort of talking, and there's a little bit where Gin sort of starts seeing what could be his future. The old man mentions that Gin reminds him of himself at that age. And then Gin gets absolutely assaulted by a group of young men who are just beating up homeless people on a Friday afternoon. And this is one of those moments that you see and your knee-jerk reaction is to go, well, this this can't be something that happens. This is too outlandish. And then you think about how truly horrifying it is that this is a real experience, right? Like, there are people who have such little regard for others and who do go out and target vulnerable members of communities, or members of vulnerable communities, excuse me.
Yeah, it's definitely a very serious moment in this film because, I mean, as with, the Hispanic people, like, it's a representation of something that really happens in Japanese culture. I mean, really, there's no way to say, but it probably still happens to this day. And it kind of represents this detachment from, the plights of homeless people. I mean, we experience that in America too. It's like, it's a very real thing.
Yeah. And there is, like, this film does do a good job because the film's not about what it's like to be homeless. This is just something that happens to homeless people. But this film does do a very good job of having moments where, like, they are experiencing people trying to ignore them, trying to forget that they exist until they either inconvenience them or they are forced to interact with them, which, whew, salient. Yeah. So the folks beaten on Geen leave because one of them gets a call from one of the girls that they're going to hang out with that night. And so Geen sort of drags himself to an alleyway where an angel asks him, "Do you want my magic or an ambulance?" And Geen goes, "An ambulance."
I guess I don't think I really understand that joke.
Then passes out. Which is great because then the angel goes, "That's rude." Hana and Miyuki are sort of out of resources, out of options, so Hana takes Miyuki to this place that she knows of that turns out to be the performing lounge of the drag club that she used to work at. And when she opens up the door, she is immediately apologizing, right? She immediately goes, after what I did, I'm sure, like, I don't have any right to be here, but we don't have any other options. And while she's in the middle of that, her drag mother just embraces her with so much love and affection and happiness to see her back. And turns out Geen had also been taken in by the women of the club and is recovering on the couch there. And the angel that he found was one of the girls in costume. This is where we figure out Hana's backstory. She was a performer, happily married, or at the very least happily, like, in a committed relationship, who was performing and spilt someone's drink, and he was drunk and heckling her. And while she was performing, he shouts out something about Hana being an old man, and Hana turns around and goes, "Old I'll take, man I won't," and beats the shit out of him. Yes, girl. And then she had sort of left because, causing so much trouble for everybody.
Oh, I forget, didn't
And I guess Hana's, partner also died shortly after.
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah. So we figure this out because Hana's talking to her drag mother, and her mother is going, "Where have you been? And why haven't you been here?" And Hana goes, I didn't have the right to face you after all of that. And her mother goes, "Oh, well, the little money took care of that." And it's such a delightful depiction of just having such unconditional positive regard for somebody. I love it a lot. They get all ready to go. They spend the night. Geen, while he was in the shelter with the old man, found a poster in the old man's wall that matched the tower of that matched a tower that was in the background of the picture of the baby's mom and dad. So that's their next lead. They get over there, and they're there. And yeah, some like neighborhood women are around.
Well, they find out that the house that this picture was taken at was just like burnt down somehow, which honestly I don't even remember what actually happened there. I know they probably say, but
So
I missed that.
Directly mention it, or at the very least, it's sort of an offhanded thing. It burnt down. It got demolished. It's for whatever reason. There's a very delightful bit where one of the neighborhood women stops by to feed the cats that are in like the lot that they're in, that like the lot that we used to be the house. And so they start to ask her about, like, do you know what happened to these couples? We get a little bit of backstory. And then when she starts drawing a blank, she starts calling in more neighborhood women. And by the time we get done with the story, we cut back to them. And there's like 10 of them, just 10 old women gossiping. And I love it. While this is happening, Miyuki is reading one of the newspapers from just like that are lying around. And she sees an ad from her father saying, so before this we had discovered that Miyuki ran away from home because she stabbed her dad, because she, very depressed teenager, her like one real lifeline and like the thing that was keeping her going was her cat named Angel. And one day she can't, like, the cat runs away or something. She stabs her dad in like a fit of rage / a panic. And that's when she ran away, right? Like afraid of what would happen, overwhelmed, runs away from home.
When you kind of get a hint of that earlier, because they're on a subway at one point and like she sees someone across the platform in a different subway car. And she like freaks out, and like you don't quite know who that is at that point. It definitely, it just sets the stage in these very like neat ways, I feel like.
So while Gin and Hannah are learning about what happened to the folks, Miyuki reads a newspaper clipping from her dad, or that includes an ad that her dad put out that says, Miyuki, Angel's come home. Angel has come home. And so Miyuki's feeling some sort of way. We find out that the parents of the child, the dad racked up a gambling debt, started drinking himself silly. The wife started working at this basically sex club to pay off the debts. Yeah. I don't know where they went
after this.
So I don't know where like they went as a family unit. You know what I mean? I don't know if they say that they know where they went, where they like went off to next. But
yeah, well, I mean, it feels a little unclear. I mean, because we do learn that the husband is just like living in an apartment that's just like completely trashed and just like full of trash.
I know what it is. They find a scrap of paper or like a calendar that has like the address of where their new place is going to be.
Oh yeah.
But along the way, Hana goes to so Hana's been coughing up blood a little bit. Hana's at the hospital. While at the hospital, Miyuki with the baby is talking to this woman. Miyuki's talking to this nurse. Nurse has the same name as the baby. Spoiler alerts, we find out that nurse is Gin's daughter. Gin sees her, and they start talking. And Hana, some illness, right? Yeah. Some hand wave illness. They spend the night in the hospital. Gin had saved 300,000.
It was 30,000 yen, which is about $300, I think.
Save 30,000 yen to sort of give to his daughter if he ever saw her, as like an apology gift. The cost of Hana's medical care is 29,800 yen. So, and there's sort of that moment. But while he's paying it, his daughter walks by and notices him. We then cut to the two of them talking. We then cut to Gin and the doctor who operated on Hannah saying, yeah, all that's left is for rest and nutrition. And in another very salient moment, Gin goes, "Doctor, we're homeless. Rest and proper nutrition are not something that we have." Anyway, Gin and his daughter are talking, figure out that she's doing pretty okay. Figure out what really happened is Gin ran up enough gambling debts, and they started getting pushed onto his family. And he ran away, basically. And Hana, at this point, done do be getting angry about it. And so she stands up, she yells at him in front of his daughter, and has this sort of moment where she's calling him out for, being a coward, leaving behind his family, and how dare he lie to them about it, about the story that he told them. And then stomps off.
Well, they don't have the baby at this point, do they?
No, they do. Miyuki has the baby.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I couldn't remember. I was like, what?
And so,
that's when they storm off. Yeah, I remember now.
Miyuki sort of looks a little confused and goes off with Hana, and then they're walking outside, and Hana goes, "Hey, what was that about? Like, should you have done that in front of his daughter?" And then Hana basically tells this folk story where she is casting herself as the villain in order to get people to rally behind Gin, basically giving this charade of anger to present Gin in a light that's easier for his family to take him back. And while they're walking along, Hana talks about how they need to find the parents again, and mentions that, the mother might be so worried about what they did and regret their decision so much that they're going to, also, activation warning for suicidal ideation and attempts. How the mom might be so sad that she tries to kill herself. They walk by the mom trying to kill herself.
Just like that. I mean, like, unfortunately that scene had like kind of comedic timing, because it was like they were wandering and then they just see this person getting up on the side of the bridge, and then they just turn immediately and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa.
So Hana's talking about how the mother might be so distraught that she takes off her shoes, stands on the bridge, and then jumps off, while they're walking past a woman who is taking off of her shoes and standing up on the bridge in order to jump off. It is a funny scene. I like, yeah. It's unfortunate that it's as funny as it is, but it's pretty funny. They stop her. They ask her why she's about to do what she's about to do. She says, not her baby. They realize that it's the same baby. She reaches for it with tears in her eyes, and Hana slaps the crap out of her and basically starts going off like, how dare you do this to this child, blah, 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 blah. The mother tells a story about how the husband made her do it, how the husband didn't want the kid and made her leave the kid. Well, Hana and Miyuki leave the kid with the mother. Meanwhile, Gin goes to the apartment that they found on the paper and finds the husband. And he starts yelling at the husband, like, how would you do this? How dare you do this? Turns out the husband is also a gambler, and Gin sort of sees enough of himself in the guy to go like, hey, you got to snap out of this. Like, you can't throw your life away. You can't throw away what you have and what your wife has and what you guys may have together. And the husband goes, that wasn't our kid. Our child died in childbirth, and my wife stole a kid. Turns out, yeah, the wife stole a kid. And so while she was trying to breastfeed it, they just wasn't connecting. The child wasn't partaking. And we cut to the mother doing that in a park. And that happening again. Gin runs into Hana and Miyuki after they have done their New Year's prayer at a shrine. Does a little bit of charades to communicate what happened.
Yeah, because he's like so out of breath.
And then they hunt down the mother. And the rest of this movie is insane. Absolute chase sequences and shenaniganery.
Well, this is also when like the animation just like goes off. Like there are so many like incredible sequences of running animation. And something we were discussing like after the film was over that Amy told us was that like a lot of the animations were actually modeled after like real, like different animators like actually doing runs. Yeah. Even Satoshi Kon himself apparently like did the running for Hannah's character, which is crazy. But it's just so funny because when we were watching this in theaters, I was just like, what I remembered was that was the end, was like them returning the baby. For some reason, that was what I remembered. And then just like, it just goes off the rails right after that. And it was just so funny because I didn't remember any of that. I was like, what?
A quick aside, and also something that we had mentioned after the film on Monday, is the reason why the director... So what Amy had mentioned is that there was an interview where the director had mentioned that running is a big part of his films. And we just sort of started talking about how running is a very great characterization of people because it is such a real and involved motion that unless you are a trained athlete, the way that you run is pretty instinctual. It's pretty natural. You're not putting thought into it. Again, unless you have some sort of training or maybe you've been through physical therapy and so it's an action that you've had to learn, like cognitively decide to learn. Throughout the film, and like earlier moments of hurry, we will see Gin running, but it's always sort of like a half-hearted shuffle. You know what I mean? It's always sort of like a vague, like... In these moments where things are serious, he is doubling down, like not like perfectly efficient, but very deliberate motions, very deliberate running.
Hauling ass.
And throughout the film, Hana runs in a very feminine way, elbows in, hands up, sort of like a fast sashaying sort of motion, in very much a traditionally female way. And I had mentioned that I liked that a lot because, again, running is very instinctual. It's not something that you put thought into. And I love that, you know, for whatever whatever we want to say about the depiction of the gender politics of the film, Hana runs like a woman because she is a woman. And I love that. I love that a lot. Anyway.
Yeah, this is just one crazy chase sequence.
Which has a sound... The soundtrack to this movie is very good. There's nothing like that particularly stands out as like these like grand themes or like grand orchestral things because, you know, it's a movie. It's just sort of a backing track most of the time. In this chase sequence, it has real big like supersonic racing energy, and I really love it. Anyway, long and the short, they chase the mom down to the top of like a shopping center where she's basically saying that she's going to jump off with the child so that they get reincarnated together. And Miyuki is there first and it's like trying to talk her down. The mom goes to jump. Miyuki catches her, but not enough to like get her up. Hana and Gin manage to catch up enough to stop them from going over, but then something that they've like perched on gives way and they start to fall. The three of them who are not Hana end up getting caught on this like secondary roof, so they're fine. But Hana is falling still. And in the only like really big like mystical moment, Hana's holding on to like this like banner that was on the outside of the building. This big gust of wind comes by that has enough updraft to just gently lower her and the child in this very like grand orchestral like holy moment that is like the cornerstone moment of like the movie, and it is like intentionally like over the top, and there's like this angelic choir going underneath it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's supposed to be like a representation of like a miracle, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's a reason why Hana was the one to catch the child, and there's the reason why it's like set up the way that it is. So then we go to the hospital, where we see the actual parents being so pleased that their child is back, talking to this police detective. He talks about it. The guy thanks the police detective, and the detective goes, "Hey, don't thank us. If it wasn't for those folks, like, we'd never have found her." And they're like, "Well, we want to talk to him." Cut back to Hana and Gin in hospital beds with Miyuki there. And Gin's getting Miyuki to go grab him a cigarette from his jacket. And she's like, it's non-smoking. She does it anyway. And so he's smoking in the hospital room, and there's a pretty good bit there. And then Hana is like upset, and they ask her why. And like they ask her like, is it because of like, the child or whatever? And Hana goes, no, it's because this is the men's ward. And I love it. I love her so much. Yeah, the detective opens up the door.
Well, and like right before that, he's like, "Are you sure you want to see them? They're homeless." And they're like, "Yo, no, yeah, we want to see them."
No. So he doesn't go, "Are you sure you want to see them?" He says, "Are you sure that you want to do this?" Which sounds a little bit like, but then they go, "Yes, we're sure. We want them to be her godfathers."
The Tokyo Godfathers, mic drop, the end of the episode. Just kidding.
Now, to be fair, not the most financially secure place to trust your child in the event of your passing. But I digress. The detective opens up the door, looks at Miyuki, and Miyuki goes, "Dad?" And then credit roll. That's it.
And it's like the same responses that like Keen had with his daughter too.
It's a charming film. It's really good. It is really good. It's very heartwarming. Everything is done in like the animation. Yeah, it kicks up towards the end as like more action is happening, but even throughout all of it, it's so beautiful. The way that the scenes are composed, like it's all snowy cityscape, but it's such a gorgeous like depiction of like the way that the people play against the backdrop. It's a fantastic movie. It really is.
Well, and it was animated by Madhouse too, which I didn't even mention, but they did like original Trigun, they did Death Note, they did Hunter x Hunter, they did Parasite the Maxim, they did the first season of One Punch Man, and they're doing currently Frieren, so I mean they're like super well versed, and I mean like it shows in pretty much everything they've ever animated, including this. Anyway, do you have anything else, Jack?
No. Yeah, no. It's a delightful little Christmas movie. It's worth watching. Yeah, this is a little bit different than our normal episodes, but there's a reason for it. In the name of the holiday spirit, go give Forrest a like and a follow over at
yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Bustello, Bustello. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, if you care about social media, which you shouldn't, but please listen to my music. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.